Hi, I'm looking forward to our 5-day intensive training on big deal selling coming up in the next few days or the coming weeks. And wanted to send out a brief introductory video before we start the course, just to kind of get you into a big deal mindset. You know, we're really moving from a transactional mindset to a big deal mindset, and that's a pretty big shift. And so I just wanted to plant a couple of seeds before we get started. So thanks for taking a second to watch this introductory video. So look, you and I are both salespeople. We're accustomed to setting goals and accomplishing them, and I want to do that in this training also. I am sincerely committed to helping you write one deal in the next 12 months that's worth 50% or more of your annual quota. I'd love it if it could be 100% or 200%. And those deals are doable when you start thinking the way that we're going to talk about thinking. And when you start shifting out of a transactional mindset into a really big deal mindset. So let's set that as a goal. One deal within the next 12 months worth 50% or more of your quota. I thought it might make sense before we get started for me to give you just a little bit of background on Blaine. I grew up in a lower middle class family, fundamentally very conservative values. Always heard, we can't afford that. We don't have enough money. We can't go on vacation. I didn't have too much fun as a kid, and I really wanted to change that. And my whole life I've been pretty diligent and very focused. And I really did just put my head down and work hard to find a way out of that environment. In Texas, at the time, you could get a hardship license and start driving at 15. And so I got a car at 15 years old and went straight to work because I saw that as a way for me to get out of the house and start to make some money and start to change my situation. I saved and I put money away for college, and I worked through the 5-year plan at Texas A&M. It took me 5 years to get out of school because I was working 40 hours a week. But I did that, and Neiman Marcus recruited at Texas A&M, and they recognized this work ethic of mine, I guess, and they hired me right into their buying offices. And I started buying very high-end merchandise for 22 of their stores out of the buying offices in Dallas, Texas. And did well at that, and they promoted me to open a store. The newest store at the time was in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, in Northern Virginia. So I moved from Texas to Virginia, and I liked working there. And I was on the employee discount plan, so I had a whole lot nicer clothes, but I was still broke. And I realized that retail was not going to be for me long term. The other thing I came to realize pretty quickly is that I could not afford to live in Northern Virginia in my late 20s. I think it's still probably the most expensive place in the country to live, maybe next to Orange County. So I moved back to Texas, and I got my first outside sales job with Pitney Bowes. And this was a briefcase carrying, territory-driven sales job. I mean, the message was, go in the base of that skyscraper, start on the first floor, see how many people you can see on that first floor, and then go to the second floor, and then go to the third floor. And then the bell rings at 5 o'clock, come back and start on the fourth floor. And I put my head down and I did that, and I wrote more new business my first year with Pitney Bowes than any of the other 60 sales reps in that Houston office. Problem was that I was selling $18 a month meters. And I needed bigger deals because I still wasn't making very much money. I kept working at it though, and I finally wrote my first big deal. It's funny to think of it as a big deal today, but at the time it really was. I sold it to the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. It was a $50,000 lease. I sold them the biggest mailing machine we had and a big folder inserter also that they use to communicate with their donor base. The Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo is still in existence today, and they're a nonprofit organization and all of their proceeds and all of their revenues come from donations. And at the time, all of their donations came through mail solicitation. So they would send out tons of mail to people in Houston and ask them to become a member of the rodeo and also to contribute to the rodeo. Problem was they had a database, of an address database, that was really in really bad shape. And Pitney Bowes at the time had what was a unique product in the market, and some address cleansing software, and which I sold to them to drive mailroom costs out and donations up. Because what this address cleansing software would do is it went through, the database and made sure that all of the addresses in that database were deliverable. And then it also allowed them to pre-sort that mail so that when it came out, it was ready for deep postage discounts. And so we drove a lot of efficiency in the mailroom with these two great pieces of equipment, and drove a lot of costs out as well. And in fact, at the end of the day, I ended up justifying that $50,000 sale with a $100 a month subscription to this address cleansing software. And really, I had kind of an epiphany. I just need to find out how much money I'm going to save my customer, and then I need to sell them that much gear. And that's kind of a thing I've done my whole career. And then I combined that with making a lot of calls on this customer and bringing a lot of my teammates from the local office in there, my divisional manager, my technical specialists, etc., on these two pieces of equipment. And, when I did that, a light bulb kind of went off for me, and said, if I combine good ROI discovery and articulation and quantification with team selling and build a lot of relationships, I can sell big deals. And then I kind of started saying to myself, if I can sell a $100 software package and justify $50,000 worth of gear, how much business value can I drive with a $100,000 software package, or even bigger? And so I joined Computer Associates, and I was one of 14 sales reps in Houston at the time. There were 10 mainframe sales reps, so they sold software that ran on the mainframe, and I sold software that ran on the distributed platforms. The mainframe guys really were strange to me because they really were extortionists. I don't want to go down a rat hole on this, but mainframe software is an interesting animal, because once somebody's running it, it's very, very difficult to get off. And they really took advantage of that at renewal time. Not solution oriented. It was kind of sickening to me to see some of the deals that these guys did. And I never wanted to sell that way, and never did. And I started calling on Telecheck, a division of First Data Corp, and really focused on their unique business outcomes. And the things that they were really trying to accomplish are listed here. They were owned by First Data Corp, which was a big mainframe shop up in Denver, and they have a big data center out in Maryland as well, and one down in Florida also. But in all of the other FDC data centers have mainframes in them, and so these guys, Telecheck, were all distributed, and they kind of felt like they kind of felt like second fiddle to First Data, and they really wanted to change that. That was one of their unique business outcomes. It was politically driven in some ways, also financially driven in some ways, but I really focused on helping them shore up, the way they were viewed by FDC and how their staff was viewed by FDC, and also really validated that client server environment to FDC, who was very mainframe centric, and they wanted to do that as well. And they had a lot of, like so many client server environments at the time, they had a lot of sprawl. So their data center was growing like crazy, and they weren't confident that they were getting all the value out of it that they could, and their costs were pretty high. So they wanted to drive that sprawl down and costs out and efficiency up. So we really focused on those things. I sold them a product called Unicenter for server monitoring, and then a whole Unicenter ITIL suite. Asset management, software delivery, help desk, remote control. So really drove a lot of efficiency with those tools, and then implemented it all for about $500,000. So it was a total of about a $700,000 deal. And the tactics really that I used to do that really focused on the customer's desired business outcomes, those unique things that they were really specifically trying to accomplish at a business level, not speeds and feeds, not racks and stacks, but from a business perspective, what are you really trying to accomplish? Had lots of constituents, so I met with a lot of people there, made a lot of friends, built a lot of relationships, introduced a lot of people at CA, a lot of the people that I worked with at CA, to a lot of the folks inside of Telecheck. So really just kind of swarmed them with contacts, and made all the difference. And then I also used my financial selling calculator or configurator to help them build their own deal. I bring up a picture of a Ferrari there. So many things in the world today you can buy with a configurator, but you can't buy one with enterprise software. And this is something that you'll hear me talk a lot about through the curriculum, is really how to build that configurator and use it in your sales cycles. So another light bulb went off for me here. If I really focus on the business outcomes, and I have lots of contacts, and I do a lot of team selling, and I help the customer build their own deal, I can write a big deal. This was a $700,000 deal. So, I went from 50 up to 700, really by employing these tactics. So now let's talk for a second about mistakes that salespeople make that really keep them from writing bigger and bigger deals. One is that they just kind of settle for smaller, simpler deals. They got to have their singles and doubles. They got to turn a transaction. They got to get it off the street. They got to keep the lights on. And, it's a little bit of a balancing act, right? Because companies today do need transactions, and they need to pay for G&A and T&E. But what I want to focus on is really kind of taking a little different motion here and get out of our comfort zone and work to sell some large needle-moving transactions. So instead of doing those things on that previous slide, let's leverage a proven process for big deals. Let's do our research. Let's pick a horse and place our bets. We're not going to write big deals with all of our accounts, but let's think hard about our accounts, and let's give them all a chance. And let's commit to writing one deal this year worth 50% or more of our quota. Apologize for the video kind of overlapping some of the text there, but I can't move where they put that video box. So you get the point. Another couple things that people do that impede their ability to write big deals is they use yesterday's selling tactics, and we'll talk about these. Things like last minute pricing, concessions, and deadlines to get deals done. They're banging their fist on the desk and they're saying, we're taking this deal off of the table if you don't do it this quarter. Another thing that they do is they kind of fall into this yesterday's tactics is they just sell to one or two people. They don't have enough contacts. And then another thing is they have a real intense kind of point in time focus on getting their deals done. We got to have it signed now. We need it done by the end of the quarter. Blah blah. Not tactics that work in today's environment. Instead, what I want to propose, is that we stop using yesterday's tactics and we start to focus on things like understanding the customer's unique, high-level business outcomes. Right? A lot of collaborative team selling and committee-based selling. because that's the way customers, especially in the enterprise today, they buy, right? They don't have one or two guys that are making a decision. Let's also talk to them about a long-term vision. So not so much what's going to happen next week or next month or at the end of the quarter when we get this deal done, but really what's going to happen 2 or 3 years down the road, and how our relationship is going to look then, and how much better your business is going to look. I mean, how much revenue we're going to drive for you, or how much cost we're going to drive out. And we do that by focusing on the ROI and the BAU. Another set of mistakes that I see happening really fall into kind of this leadership category, what I call a leadership category, or a leader versus follower category. There's way too much following that goes on out there. Salespeople today tend to get excited about RFPs, for instance. Customer says, well, I need this, that, or the other thing, and we just chase that tennis ball down and bring it back to them. A lot of times not getting anything in return. Customer says, email me a quote, and we say, okay. And I mean, that's a big deal killer right there, right? I mean, you don't sell big deals via quote or via email. Instead, let's start to take the lead, right? Let's drive to what I call the roll up our sleeves presentation. Let's not email them a quote. Let's do our due diligence, and let's get all of the constituents into a room and make a professional sales presentation to them. And that'll be a big part of the curriculum that we work through. Let's understand where they are in TSIA's layer model. If you haven't heard of layer, this is another thing that we'll talk a lot about in the curriculum. It's an acronym for land, adopt, expand, and renew. And we'll talk about very specific things that you got to do in this model to write big deals. And understand that every deal that we go out and work on falls somewhere in that layer model, that land, adopt, expand, renew model. And there are different things that you should do at each step of the way, and we'll talk about those in detail. And then the other that falls into this category is really this notion of pulling all the levers, or what I call gestalt selling. And really the thought here is that a lot of little problems, right, don't a deal make. But if you pull them all together, right, you can really write a nice deal, and which will be perceived by your customer as something that solves a lot of different problems. So I love this panda bear, these two panda bear pictures. I mean, all those unfamiliar shapes on the left. All you got to do is just move them around a little bit, and package them just right, and then you've got a cool looking panda bear there that is kind of synonymous with our big deals. I want to talk for a second about attendee prerequisites for this course. You may have kind of gathered by now that this really is a graduate level course. I mean, there are a few things you need to come into the course with already. Number one, a genuine empathy for the customer. I mean, I just think that, without that, big deal selling becomes nearly impossible unless you have such a highly leveraged position over your customer that you can kind of force them to buy from you. But that's more and more difficult to come by today, and not very emotionally rewarding when it is available to you. So let's go to our customer with a lot of empathy. Also, you got to have the basics, right? I mean, we're salespeople. We got to have a really strong competitive drive. We have to be driven to win. We also have kind of a coin-operated mindset. I mean, we're in this for the commissions. And then we got to have strong blocking and tackling, so you've got to know how to put together a good initial benefit statement. You've got to know how to, manage Salesforce.com to get to new customers. You've got to know how to have multiple conversations with different types of people. So I just put all of that in kind of the blocking and tackling bucket. Also, got to have a good understanding of the three legs of the stool. What I call the three legs of the stool. I think that these are the kind of the broad categories of things that as salespeople we really have to know how to do. We have to be able to determine technical fit. Do we have the products and the functionality that meets the customer's requirements? We got to be good at relationship building. We got to be able to meet people and build some rapport with them quickly and maintain that rapport. And we got to understand how we're going to help, how the software or the technical product that we're selling is going to pay for itself and actually be a good investment for the customer. We got to be able to articulate that clearly, and we've got to be able to quantify that as well. And then the other thing I think that's really, really important is kind of an open-mindedness to new deal maker approaches. I mean, this is really important to the curriculum. I mean, I got to ask everybody to really open their minds. We're going to do some things that you've probably never done before. We're going to talk about some things that you've never talked about before, probably. And we got to resist the urge to resist. We need to stay open-minded to kind of some of these new approaches that we'll talk about. One of the interesting things about sales is that it's not only science, but it's also an art. There's a lot of art to sales. And so I want to kind of talk about that for just a second. What I want to say about science is that, this is really the customer experience-based approach to selling. And we're going to look at a graph in a second that really illustrates that. But, there's just some facts around things that you want to do and things that you don't want to do. And they're proven through surveys and through, empirical conversations with customers. We want to keep those things in mind. And then we also want to keep in mind the art, though. This is kind of the artful, bag-carrying sales professionals' approach to selling. So we'll talk about those things too. Let's start first and talk a little bit about the science. This is a chart from Gartner that I just absolutely love. They pulled together 800 C-level decision makers and talked to them about the things that their vendors do that kind of encourages them or spurs them on to spend more money with that vendor. And some interesting things I think on this chart. On the left-hand side, the not significant columns, they really are focused on things like, our sales rep wants to be our one throat to choke, and he's all over all of our issues, for instance, and he or she's always working to make sure that we're getting value out of the last thing that we bought from them. Sounds a little counterintuitive, but that does not drive growth. Drives retention. And you should make sure, as a salesperson, that your CRM or your CSR are focused on those kinds of relationship kinds of things, because we want to retain the customer, certainly, but those types of activities, are not going to drive big deals. They're not going to drive growth in the account. Certainly, aggressive selling, there's just no room for that. I mean, especially in the enterprise space today. You try that old line, would you rather talk on Thursday of next week or Friday of next week? You're likely to get hit with, well, would you rather walk out of here under your own power or be escorted by security? I mean, there's just no room for that kind of stuff. Another thing that there's no room for is this deal is good through the end of the quarter, and then we're pulling it off the table. It's like, that's bull. I mean, and every customer knows it. All you do is aggravate your customer when you say stuff like that. That's not to say that we can't draw a line in the sand out into the future and have a conversation with the customer early on about when we would like to have this deal done and kind of drive towards that. but kind of last minute pricing incentives and things like that, and pulling deals off the table at the end of the quarter just doesn't work. Another thing that doesn't work is throwing just kind of what I call throwing it against the wall, or pricing without any accompanying ROI, like telling the customer, here's how much it costs, without telling them how much they're going to get back. Doesn't work. And then my favorite is this notion of bundled pricing. I mean, we'll talk in the financial selling configurator about really about itemization and breaking things out, which to many people is very counterintuitive. Like, it's much easier, and many would say it's a whole lot cleaner just to give them one price and say, this is it, and then try and sell that price. But, relationships don't get built that way. And the customer kind of feels sort of powerless that way. We'll talk more about that in the curriculum. Much better to focus on things in the 11% column and the 48% column, like team selling, like being the rep or the sales executive that nurtures many-to-many relationships. So everybody in my company knows everybody in your company. I mean, that's really where you start to build some trust with your company, with your customer. And then other things like, definitely, you've already heard me talk about it, unique business objectives. I mean, really focusing on their unique, critical things that they're trying to accomplish inside their business. Also, painting a vision for what our relationship's going to look like years to come. Not just like what it's going to look like right after we get the deal done at the end of this quarter, or the deal signed at the end of this quarter, but how is our relationship going to flourish over the next 5 years? How are things going to look in 5 years? And then, of course, and I've talked about this a lot already, but got to ROI this stuff. We've got to tell them how they're going to get their money back. And these are the things that make up big deals. Also like to get you thinking a little bit about some of the more artful things in sales. The artful bag carrying sales professional stuff. One is this notion of making this roll up our sleeves meeting happen. And this is where we get, like you see in this picture here, we get 8 people in a room, and we understand, we start to understand the political org chart, right? I mean, everybody understands the organizational chart, who reports to who's got authority, But, when you get folks into a room, you can really understand the political org chart. And what you might find is that somebody 3 layers down on the organizational chart is the person that really has the power, and you find out. So you find out who's the leader and, who's an empty suit on that org chart. Who are the true supporters and detractors? You might have somebody who's really supporting you one-on-one, but you put them in that room and it becomes apparent to you that they're not going to support you. And you got to find some other supporters in that room. This is a great place to learn, what's wrong with the deal, and put yourself in a position where you can take it out, or what's missing from the deal, and put yourself in a position where they can put it in. This is where the financial selling configurator really comes in. Another artful piece of sales that we'll talk about is this notion of using a financial selling configurator in our efforts. And the use of this configurator really is artful because it's unique and different, and customers don't see it. But what we're going to do is we're going to build a financial selling configurator, or another way to say it is an adjustable pricing workbook. And, it's an art to using this thing and really making it happen. But customers love it. They love it because it's a very collaborative tool that can be used in committee-based selling very easily. It's all of the product that is included in the financial selling configurator directly supports the desired business outcomes, or the unique business outcomes of our customers. So it's very, very focused on that. every one of them that we build and use will be will reflect multi-year ROI and multi-year pricing. So by its very definition, it has a long-term vision to it, which really jives and dovetails nicely with the science. And then it's also very ROI based. So you remember our Gartner chart. I mean, that dovetails nicely as well. So this is just a wonderful tool that I've used throughout my career, and I'm excited to tell you about it and talk about how you can use it in your sales cycles. At this point, I want to share with you kind of a preview of the 5-step big deal selling process that we'll be going over together in the coming days and weeks. A couple of things I'd like to say about it, though. First, it's a great thing because it really builds confidence, right? I mean, we're moving out of transactional selling into really big deal selling, and so confidence is key. And this is really a roadmap that you can follow to increase the average order sizes of your deals. It's proven. I've used it to write dozens of multi-million-dollar deals, a couple in the $50 million range, and my biggest at $100 million. The process was woven through all of those deals. Another thing that's worthy of note here is it not only adds revenue and average contract value, but it also will add speed, quality, and efficiency to the cycle. So you will see your cycle shorten, less ambiguity around, especially around the end of the cycle. And then the quality of your relationships and just kind of the quality of that sales motion will go up too. They'll be more fun, and you'll end up with customers that are happier after the deal than they were before the deal. And then another thing that's really important to note about it is that while I have used most of the steps in all of my big deals, I haven't used all of the steps in all of my big deals. So you can drop some of them out depending on the circumstance, but still, get a whole lot closer to writing a really big deal by using most of the steps. So let's begin with the end in mind and kind of talk about step 4 first, which is the meeting. This is really where we're headed. Like everything we do in step 1, 2, and 3 is all about putting together the very best roll up our sleeves meeting that we can. And in the roll up our sleeves meeting, this is the meeting that I was talking about on that artful slide where, we get all of our constituents in a room and we make a professional sales presentation to them. And we'll talk a lot about how to get those people in a room, and we'll also talk about the professional sales presentation itself and how important it is that it be a very customer-centric presentation. I mean, there's no marketing fluff in there. There's not information in there, but even from other customers. This is all about the particular customer that we're trying to sell to. And everything in step 1, 2, and 3 is all about building to that meeting. Step 1 is do your research to uncover the big deal that nobody's even thought about yet. And so this will be our first hour or hour and a half that we spend together. And we'll be talking a lot about how to do that research and how to really get our claws into what's most important to that customer at an executive or at a C level. Then we'll focus a lot on, in step 2, and the second day that we spent together, we'll focus on building the big deal in a multi-year adjustable financial selling configurator and really how to do that. And rest assured that we'll be putting a lot of products in there, and because we'll be really understanding the ROI, we'll be maximizing the revenue and minimizing the discounts. And then in step 3, we'll talk about setting the presentation day table. We'll set the table both internally with our internal team, and we'll also set the table with our customers and our customer constituents. And that will get us right up to the roll up our sleeves meeting. That work in 1, 2, and 3 will get us to a point where we can have a really awesome roll up our sleeves meeting. And then we'll, in our final step, we'll talk about anticipating and overcoming objections, and specifically how you can use the financial selling configurator to overcome objections. Just a couple of final points I'd like to ask you to keep in mind. One is that we really do have to get out of our comfort zone. And it's an effort to move away from transactional selling and into big deal selling. So, expect that, but also expect significant increases to your commissions checks. But the important thing about our communications and the week or so that we're going to spend together, is really collaboration, communication. A lot of two-way dialogue. Really, research shows that the greater the participation, the greater the learning. And it's my goal to, at the end of this class, to make sure that you really are up to speed on this process and that you start to incorporate the things that we talk about into your sales cycles. So, please come to those meetings with lots of questions and comments and concerns, and let's kick ideas around, and, let's really stay engaged. And then please take a lot of notes. This will be, I'll send you things, but this will be curriculum that you can use going forward, and you'll want to be able to refer back to your notes. Also, studies show that the more note taking that there is, the more retention there is as well. And then let's have some fun too. Sometimes sales is not fun, so let's, at least in these hour and a half, 2 hour long discussions that we have, let's have some fun. I'm really looking forward to it, and I will talk to you at our prescribed time in the coming days. Thanks for taking a second to watch this intro video, and I'll talk to you soon.